Welcome. It is September 3rd. This is the Newberg City Council meeting. I call this meeting to order. Rachel, could we have roll call, please?
Councillor McBride?
Here.
Councillor Wheatley? Here. Councillor Yarnell Holloman? Here. Councillor Kilberg?
Here.
Mayor Rosacker?
Here.
Councillor Cloyd is absent, and Councillor Carmen is absent.
Thank you. Would you like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? So one of our favorite parts of all of our meetings is the city manager's report. Will?
Thank you. Maybe if I speak very softly, does that help? Next slide, please. Okay. So here we go. Boom. Looking forward, we are trying to get some sections of road near Edwards Elementary School resurfaced while the weather holds. Time is short, but we might just pull it off. We heard today, in fact, that we have got a company that will bid on the 12 ramps that we have to build down near the school in order to go ahead and do some paving down in that section. That's about 4 blocks. We might pull it off. Let's hope it doesn't rain. New slide, please. And there's a diagram. The sections that we're trying to do next are the ones between AB and CD, and this between EF and GH. And where you see EF, that's complicated because there's 2 driveways we have to put in there, and also we have to put ramps at various locations. But those are 2 sections. They were on some of our worst streets. They also constantly get fixed for potholes. We haven't got a lot done this year because we got started fairly late in the year, but just wait till next year. We're going to get a great deal more road resurfacing done next year, as you guys can expect. New slide, please. Safety Town Camp is a yearly program the department does every year in connection with CPRD. Officer McDonough teaches kindergarten kids all about all aspects of personal safety, and it's good fun too. New slide, please. National Night Out was a huge success. The chief and I cooked so many hot dogs, a vast abundance of them, almost 300. There was a dunk tank, a bounce house, a car smash where kids got to smash up a car with a sledgehammer. And yes, we did have a special insurance coverage for the event. New slide, please. And here's a few pictures from National Night Out. In particular, many of the children enjoyed the K9 Ike and Sam plushies. They were a really big hit with the kids. National Night Out. You can really just call it a lovely family-friendly event. It was very, very nice. Public Works Emergency Management. With the seasonal rise in temperatures, we always push a reminder so everybody can do their smoke and heat training in early July. In eLearn software, we use various things to do annual refreshers. We're monitoring recently 3 wildfire starts on the Yamhill, Washington County border. None of them actually came to anything as of right now. The county heat shelter announcements were sent out. And of course, smoke air quality is being monitored, as we always do at this time of year. The PLC project, that is the programmable logic controllers. After a couple of years, I finally learned how to say that properly. The city executed its contract with Green Power Electric Contractors August 2nd. As required by state regulations, there was an archaeological vendor out July 31st. We have found out recently there were no issues, and the city staff checked in with EPA periodically and was informed on August the 6th that they're still working on some reviews, but we don't think there's anything that's going to hold this up. We're hoping to get the PLC project finished this year. The notice to proceed was given to contractors. They've hit the ground running, and while electricians are continuing to prepare the wiring and replacement plans, The contractor is continuing the programming of the units. So what is this thing I'm gibbering on about? These are computers for the wastewater plant that work specific types of servos, a type of pump. That's about all I know. The old hardware and software was out of date and we're replacing it with new equipment. Groundwater treatment plant filter covers. In a letter dated 10/18/21, Oregon Health Authority placed an unfunded mandate on the city to install new covers over the existing filters and basins. Keller Associates, working as the new city engineer of record, has come up with a cost-effective proposal. The design cost likely to be in the $95,000 range, construction cost, perhaps $500,000 to $600,000. We may just pull this off without spending too much of our local tax dollars because of the congressional earmark that we got funded, and that money should come to us. So perhaps $100,000 to $200,000 in the hole, not bad for another one of those ghastly unfunded mandates. Some recent maintenance actions: water main flushing, services connecting and disconnecting, water meter maintenance, sweeping up rubbish, sweeping miles 166. And here are the improvements on 2nd Street, which we pulled off in blindingly fast record time because the cheapest bidder said, you need to do it right now or we're leaving the state and heading for Arizona. You got a week's notice. Can you do this street in actually it was 2 weeks notice. Can you do this street? So we said, yes, we can, because the price was good. So we had to do 5 sections of grind and inlay. It was a joint effort by our contractors, engineering staff, admin staff, public works maintenance staff, followed by 2 lifts of slurry seal. That's that delicious black sludge that they put on top, which you just love driving over that because it smells like victory. Meanwhile, we scored another victory against the evil work of the beavers. Now, please don't misunderstand. This is not a football biased remark. I'm referring to the actual critters that block up our creeks. And here we go, East Fernwood Drive dip getting cleared out of some naughty beaver action. Water treatment. Backflow test notices were mailed out to water customers who have those assemblies. 1,720 completed tests have come back. As of this slide being written, that's 57% complete. So if you're a person watching this at home who has to do backflow testing, please do respond to staff as soon as possible, because we don't want sludgy stuff from your tanks backing up into our water system. Did I say that okay, Russ? You did. Thank you. Here is the hypochlorite storage tank replacement. This is the tanks at the water treatment plant that provide chlorination and kill all those bugs which otherwise we would suffer from dysentery and other unpleasant diseases. Now, the city uses a liquid material, hypochlorite, instead of the much more dangerous chlorine gas. But we had to get new tanks to hold that substance. And that was a big job. Community engagement. The month of August involved lots of engineering and city council support for a couple of community-focused events. Social media was heading out, telling people what's going on, and a list of downtown Newberg stakeholders were kept in the loop as updates were received for the parking lot and the 2nd Street work. Crikey, look at that slide. That is a beautiful piece of graphic design done by Emily. And it says it all with just a few words. Also, there was an advertised community listening session on short-term rentals. The event was a great opportunity for a face-to-face dialogue with community members. Great turnout, and it is promising for future listening sessions in town halls that we may have in the future. And once again, what a smashing piece of graphic design. They look like little potatoes out there. CE also provided design work to Public Works Maintenance and the mapping team to create wayfinding signage. Now, thanks to the amazing work done earlier by the city planners, we actually know that we don't have a parking shortage in these lots. But we also know that many people don't know where the other lots are. So with the parking lots being resurfaced, soon we're going to be putting up signs to tell people where the parking lots are, one from another. And that'll make it more user-friendly. And there's another great piece of graphic design, parking lot repair update. Of course, we can't control the weather. City Recorder's Office. It began with a visit from a student delegation from our sister city, Azago City in Japan. They enjoyed the exploration of the town and especially the delicious burgers at Gem 100, which cannot be rivaled in the state of Oregon, nay the West Coast. We then welcomed 2 local students as mayor and city manager for the day, and they were right here. They did a grand job. Received election filings for candidates, wrapping up on August 17th. And extensive code review work was done for the upcoming 2-year budget cycle shift. Went through many record requests, training staff on public meetings, developing and offering training on records management system, and finishing out with a George Fox University community fair for undergraduates where they failed to eat enough pirate booty, which is why you were able to enjoy pirate booty this evening. During the month of August, Finance had an interim visit from the auditors to begin the testing of internal controls of various aspects of the city finances. This regular testing will complete in November when the books will close for last fiscal year and the annual comprehensive financial report will be completed for their review. Finance has also been working hard on Operation Quadratic to begin preparing for the biennial budget shift. They did research on Oregon budget law and relevant statutes, all of which would be needed for the big move to 2-year budget cycles. Finance and the CM have met with several other cities, including Eugene, Sandy, and Hillsborough, to learn tips and pitfalls to be encountered during this shift. That was very informative. Finance also began working on an update to the utility billing policy, which will be an informational session on Council at October 7th. And of course, the Operation Quadratic documentation is now flowed over to Miller Nash for legal review. Human Resources had a hand in 2 promotions this month. Connor, who's sitting right there, who was promoted to System Administrator. And that followed Joseph's promotion to IT Manager. And I would mention that these blokes faced stiff opposition from outside candidates, and in our completely ethical double-blind hiring system that we have used for 3 years, they were able to score the highest. HR also coordinated with NDPD at the beginning of the month to put on another lunch and learn, and this one was fantastic. It was called What Not to Do at a Traffic Stop. Officer Levi Fergus expertly did this to the extent that so many people were impressed that he was nominated for and won the Strive Award for putting it on. Library Land. Well, that's a wrap on 2024 summer reading for all ages. A huge shout out to the library staff for creating an engaging and well-run program. This year, the number of adult summer reading program entries more than doubled from 2023 to a whopping 4,766 and 331 registrations. And the pictures are on the next slide. Librarian Jessica Otto created a fun adult program that's simple and easy to participate in. Wow, look at that. children's librarian Amanda Lamb and library assistant Samantha Qualls also had smashing success this summer. After reworking last year's summer reading program for babies through 5th grade, they went from 609 returned reading logs in 2023 to 2,418 reading logs returned in 2024. Registration for babies to 5th grade broke the 2,000 mark this year with 2,267 registrations. And the Library Mascot Program, a partnership with 20 downtown businesses, also had a record-breaking 4,336 individual entries returned. That's almost all of the children in this town of the appropriate ages. That's awesome. Look at that. Good work, ladies. The mascot was spotted 4,336 times by youth at different downtown locations, and as in previous years, the library staff heard many comments from people who were led to discover our new local businesses. And I'm just going to dwell on those statistics for a minute. Look at that. How about that? All we had to do was get the Scotsman out the house. Like, community development. City Council update and direction of the sequential UGB project was provided. Historic Preservation Commission approved modification to a historic house located south of downtown. Many other actions took place, including conditional use for a 96-unit multifamily project. There were pre-application meetings for a 20-unit mixed-use development, and many, many other smaller short-term planning decisions not listed here. Also, in response to our goals to create yet better customer service, we completed the first round of OpenGov meetings with all departments, a more customer service friendly replacement for our current permit tracking system that will enable contractors to look at their permit status in real time and will streamline the process. We also received an update from ODOT and Highway 99 Urban Design Verification Study for safety improvements. Good work, folks. So that's it. Good grief, it's exhausting just going through this stuff. That's it for August 2024. As you can see, residents' tax dollars have been hard at work, as they always are. Thank you kindly. Pivoting to planning staff, because I did not bring the data with me.
Yeah, good evening, Councillor Kilburg. The larger multifamily project, I believe, is your Hayes and Springbrook. It's a vacant land adjacent to some other apartments in the area. And I'm sorry, what was your other question? Oh, the 20 unit, that is actually in the neighborhood. I believe that's in the vicinity of 2nd and Blaine. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. And let me tell you that, you know, with every ray of sunshine, there's always a little darkness must come through too. That would mean that next year, we're definitely going to hit that 200 units as we think about water production. So with Kalina, that add 60 for Kalina, add all that up. So we're still building houses at the same pace. This year, little dip, looks like next year back to 200. Yeah, well, living units, yeah. So we're always have to think about that water production schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. So moving on, next item on our agenda is 6.1, water hardship exemption for McKern Court. Sorry. Oh, there are no public comment. General.
Can I ask a
public comment.
question before we move on to the next
Certainly.
review? Is there any way that we could pull off from the consent calendar to just discuss the debate forum for council candidates? No. At the end is fine, but I just wanted to discuss it. Because the consent would mean that we just approve or deny. It's a consent calendar item. It says at the bottom, it's like a little, is that okay?
All right, so McCurran Court, do we have a presentation from?
Mayor, I can keep this brief if you'd like and just report from the table here that the resolution that is before you this evening, Resolution 3949, implements the council's direction for your decision to approve water hardship exception to serve the property at 901 South McCurran Court and disconnect that water service from its neighbor to the north, providing for water service to both properties. And the resolution would direct the or authorize the city manager to sign the 3 agreements that are attached to the council report. The resolution sets out the terms for those agreements.
It seems that we have talked about this in depth. I think we all understand where we stand. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure. Or you want to do it, Mike?
Yeah. I'll move that we accept this resolution number 2024-3949.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve this resolution. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Mr. Gunn, are you still wanting to make public comment? And the same for Tina? Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is an ordinance amending the Newberg Municipal Code related to daycare facilities and play structures.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Jeremiah Cromie, Associate Planner for the record. I do have a short presentation, which should be pulled up shortly. Okay. We'll get there. So I'll do this kind of off. Oh, there we go. Perfect. No, you can go to the next slide. So back in November of last year, back in November of last year, Council Olson, who's now resigned, presented on daycare issues and barriers to this council. And as part of that, planning department put it in our work plan that council approved back in January as a critical update to look at daycare barriers. And so we did that, and a memo was presented back in March of this year, highlighting those barriers that were identified in the November meeting. And so the 3 items, I'll back up for a minute. So when we looked at those barriers, and some of them were, we've already taken care of. The SDCs we eliminated. There's some confusion over interpretations, which we've cleaned up. There was concern over paper permitting, which we've gone now all electronic. There's a couple other items such as safety, traffic lighting, and traffic studies that were identified, but depending on the location, they're still going to be required. We can kind of guide people towards where they may not be required. The other would be traffic safety and lighting. And we just don't believe from a safety standpoint that that's something to be looked at this time. So there was a couple other items though that definitely needed to be addressed. And those 2 main ones that we looked at that we can have control over was that daycares in the light industrial districts currently are conditionally use permitted. As part of a state law in 2021, House Bill 3109 requires them to be permitted outright. So that we put in this proposal, as well as we took a look at the parking around the state and different cities. We were one of the highest in the entire state for daycare parking requirements. And so going through that, and you can see in your packet, the full survey of the different things. So with that, the code language changes are just changing the daycare use to allow for permitted use in M1 and M2, which is our light industrial zones. And then we did add a definition of play structure just to clear things up. And they can be in the required setbacks on the interior lines, basically 3 feet to the property line, and then in the front, 10 feet, which in most cases, everybody can meet. There was also some clarification over the parking of family childcare homes versus a daycare facility. So family childcare homes are the ones that are in the dwelling units and like single family housing units. So proposing to not have any off-street parking other than for the required dwelling. In most cases, single family, that's 2 off-street parking spaces. Typically what you have is people dropping off their kids within 5-10 minutes, maybe 15 if they need to talk to somebody. And as well as the commercial daycare facilities, looking at the surrounding jurisdictions and other jurisdictions we looked at, we were recommending 1 space per employee plus 1 space for 10 children or adults cared for. So you can have an adult daycare as well. So just you're aware of that. So findings you see in the packet related to statewide planning goals, the comprehensive plan and our Newberg municipal code for type 4 legislative hearings. The planning commission did unanimously pass resolution 2024-394 on their July 11th meeting, recommending the council adopt the proposed code changes and findings and the ordinance before you tonight, 2024-2928. Staff would concur with planning commission and suggest that you adopt ordinance 2024-2928 as presented. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Mike?
I just would like to say, I'm glad to see some of these changes. I think they're needed. And so thanks for putting this together.
I have a question back 2 slides, I believe you talked, go back and I can be more articulate.
Maybe I can get Rachel to go back here. There you go.
All right. No, 1 more. All right. So the last line of the first paragraph, but not including dwellings, garages, carports, accessory structures, or sheds. My understanding was we typically did not say what was not included because that's not an all-encompassing list. Why are we making exceptions on this one?
So I don't know if I can fully answer your question, but so we're trying to define kind of play structure. So people could use essentially inside their dwelling or garage that, will have a play structure inside. We're trying to differentiate between a play structure and a shed. So it's more what you would think of a typical swing set playhouse. I don't think there's anything intended to throw off people there. Maybe your question is about the sheds being included in that, or that it's in there. Just you're saying that sentence shouldn't be there.
Well, no, I mean, you've accepted dwellings, but you've not accepted commercial structures, for instance, and a myriad of other things. So we typically don't say these things aren't included unless if it is a list of actual things that are not included. Am I incorrect about that, James?
You're talking about just from a pure kind of drafting standpoint with respect to the definition, or?
I'm thinking that down the road, somebody's gonna come in and have some, a doghouse and call it a play structure, and it's not accepted on your list. Doesn't say doghouse.
Can I say, what if you added language of something like, or equivalent to, or along the lines of, something that it allows for interpretation of a new flashy play structure in 2026 that isn't on there? Or such, yeah. exactly.
So I think even in the current definition there, it says, or other similar structures intended specifically for outdoor recreational activity. So you're saying put it. You want to be more specific than that.
No, I'm thinking that the last 6 words need to be just deleted, but not include, well, I mean, we usually don't specify the things that are not included in the law. Especially in planning and building, because builders can be crazy. You can have one. It's not a big deal to me. I just thought it just seemed like it's inconsistent with the way that we write our ordinances. All right,
I
anybody
mean,
else?
it's
Mike?
something council desires. We can certainly strike that last.
I'm not directing, I'm asking if that's something we want to do. Mike?
I mean, I don't know. I'm okay with taking, if you stopped at activities for persons and just stop there and just take the rest out, I mean, I'm okay with that. But I guess I'm not exactly following clearly what you were trying to say, Mayor, on that. But
I think the intent is to ensure that it's in a safe outdoor space, right? I mean, is to list them out individually like that, the intent is for it to be in an open air type of space, or why does it? Where's what's the background on why those structures are called out?
So I think the intent is that so people don't claim to have a shed as outdoor play structure. We're trying to cover our bases. Is it perfect? No. But we're trying to cover our bases so people can't say, hey, well, my shed's a play structure and now it can be closer. There are other accessory structures or carport. I mean, I guess people could say, well, I can climb on my carport, right? It's a play structure.
Jeremiah, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your observation on that, because you write a proscriptive code, a code that says what's not permitted is much more difficult than to say precisely what is permitted. And I think the intent here is, as Planner Cromie has articulated, is that there are known loopholes, there are known workarounds, and what we're trying to do is tighten that down a bit. So perhaps, and I would defer to Jeremiah on this, if you felt more comfortable saying, ending that sentence with accessory structures, comma, sheds, comma, or similar structures, or something to that effect, I think that would catch it all, perhaps. But otherwise, it is operational the way it's drafted.
Does anybody care to make a motion? Robin?
Oh,
I move we adopt ordinance number 2024. What?
just want to advise council that we've run through the legislative hearing run sheet. So if council, I guess council has a decision that it needs to make. One is, you could go through this could be the first reading or the first time it comes in front of council, and you can look to potentially adopt it at a subsequent meeting. Or if you want to adopt it tonight, we'll need to run through the legislative hearing process, and then I'll need two separate motions, one to waive the second reading, and then two to adopt the ordinance by title only.
So is staff happy with the motion the way that it is? Well, I mean, with the writing, do we need to correct and bring it back?
So I just want to clarify what the current language that council's proposing.
I would suggest we vote on it with the slight addition that Scott offered. What was it you said? Or,
Yeah, just to conclude that sentence, accessory structures, comma, sheds, comma, or similar structures.
So this is supposed to be a legislative hearing, so I now call to order this legislative hearing. At this point, do any of the councilors have declarations of conflicts of interest or abstentions to report? All right, seeing none, we've just heard the staff report. There is no public testimony, so I'm closing public testimony. Recommendations from staff, I think we've covered that pretty well. So it's time for council deliberation. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, yeah.
okay, I move we waive the second reading and adopt ordinance 2024-2020 or 29-28 as proposed, or as amended, excuse me.
Second.
So it has been moved and seconded that we approve this with the modification. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, do you want me to read it so I can read it, but, or I'll need the motion to have it read by
I
title.
believe her motion said by title only. Let me check.
Oh, okay, we did capture it. Okay. Yeah, we need to break that up. So let's have one vote on waiving the second reading and then another vote on adopting reading by title only. Yep.
So Elise, you want to go ahead and make that motion again? Or I'm sorry, Robin.
I move we waive the second reading.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to waive the second reading. All in favor signify by, it has to be, no, we can signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right. Now your motion.
I move we adopt ordinance number 2024-29-28 as amended by, oh, excuse me, by title only.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve this by title only. That we waive the second reading.
Okay. I'm ready to read the title. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in front of the council for adoption is ordinance number 2024-2928. An ordinance amending Title 15 Development Code related to daycare facilities and play structures with the amendment as described by Director Siegel to the definition of play structure.
So is there any more discussion? All right. Rachel, could we have a voice vote or a roll call vote, please? Thank you.
Yes, Counselor McBride,
Yes.
Counselor Wheatley,
Yes.
Counselor Yarnell Holloman,
Yes.
Counselor Kilberg,
Yes.
Mayor Rosacker,
Yes.
and that's 5 yeses.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Now we're looking at ordinance amending the Newberg Municipal Code. This is 2929, the sign code amendment. Is that you as well, sir?
That is me as well, Jeremiah Cromie, Associate Planner for Record. I also have Sergeant Ronning from our Code Enforcement Division to answer questions, as well as Neil Winter in the audience from our code compliance officer. So,
All right, excuse me just a minute. This is a legislative as well. I need to back up. I now open this legislative hearing. Declaration of conflicts of interest or abstentions. Any of the counselors? There are none. Staff reports right now. Thank you.
thank you, Mayor. So background on this sign code, proposed sign code amendment is that code enforcement staff asks planning staff to bring code amendments to fix an issue in the field they're seeing regarding the difference between portable and minor freestanding in our definitions, as well as clean up some other language regarding time restrictions around portable signs. And so on the left, I know it's kind of hard to see, is your portable, more typical A-frame sign. And then the other, what we would consider a minor freestanding sign, is those ones with the metal stakes in the ground. You kind of see over on the right of that slide. So the proposal would update definitions. It would also update unnecessary language regarding time restrictions and portable signs. Portable signs would still be not allowed when the business is closed. It would also update how permission is given, how code enforcement verifies portable signs, and then some clerical fixes around resolute highways. So the difference between the freestanding sign and portable sign, you see it's pretty minor there, but to clean up the definition of it, that inserted into the ground for the freestanding one, and then not inserted for the portable. There's been some confusion over that, and I'm sure Sergeant Ronning can discuss that here in a minute if you would like. The other just code language changes, it's a quick fix to a resolute highway, it's a clerical fix. And then the other code language changes for lots in C3 and C4, that sign owner has to have the signs removed during business hours. Signs can't be present between the hours of 2 and 5, which would be struck. And then the written permission that's currently required to be attached to the sign, that's needs to be presentable to code enforcement upon request. And then also in the other zones, it's getting rid of the hour requirements, but signs still can't be displayed for more than 4 consecutive days. So this is typically your residential districts, but it includes all other districts other than C3 and C4, which C3 is our downtown district. C4, there's a little bit down in the riverfront district that currently isn't developed. Findings related to statewide planning goals, comprehensive plan, and our type 4 procedures for legislative hearings. Planning Commission unanimously passed resolution 2024-395 on July 11th. They recommended City Council adopt the proposed code amendments and findings and proposed ordinance 2024-2929. Staff would suggest, as well as adopting ordinance 24-29 as proposed and waive the second reading of the ordinance. We did receive some supplemental comments from Mr. Soapy. There was one we were amenable to as allowing the portable or minor freestanding signs outside of that C3 district. And I think Sergeant Ronning has maybe some other things he'd like to mention, but also happy to take questions.
Why is there a limit on no more than 4 consecutive days? I'm just thinking of a business that's open maybe 5 or 6 days a week.
Yeah, honestly, we didn't want to take all restrictions away because we didn't want to have somebody put a sign out and it can be considered permanent. That's a good question. We could consider revising that, but I wanted to leave something in there. Mostly I was talking about, the small signs, we were thinking about the freestanding signs primarily. But that is a good question. It's something we look at revisiting if council thinks that that's appropriate. We just want to leave it open-ended and remove all the language, make, somebody will put out a garage sale sign, for example, would stay permanent.
One thought might be to just have it during open business hours, period. I mean, that would include any day of the week.
I don't think that would necessarily I don't know if that would just do it all by itself because it'd be worried about addressing things that aren't maybe advertising a business. Or garage, well, I guess you could say garage sale could be a business when they're closed, they have to remove it. But I see your point, I see where you're going.
And just so you know, currently, the downtown businesses in the C3 district, they are not allowed to have signs out when they are not open.
I do like what Peggy just brought up about the option of either 5 days or during business hours if people are open to that, but I won't die on the hill.
Counselor Holloman, just, are you talking about outside of the downtown? So I just want to know how you would define being closed or the business hours.
I guess I want to know why. I guess I just want to know the intent behind it. Like, I'm sure you have example after example. So I would just love a couple of examples as to the reason as a small business owner, I would love for my signs to be, I'm not in the downtown district. I would love for my sign to be able to be there during business hours. I think it's totally appropriate to be removed when you're leaving and there should be enforcement of that. It can't just sit outside. I understand that. But I would prefer the 5 days a week or during operational business hours of the business and then responsible to take it in.
Yeah, for the downtown and the C3, I would agree if we change that to business hours, because obviously there's businesses open for the, on the weekends and what have you. Whether it's 5, 6, or 7 days a week, as long as it's, they're removed during times business is closed.
So I had a question about you spoke about residential signs, freestanding signs, and it said 3 square feet. Are we talking about like the campaign signs that we have out now, or is that something else altogether?
Campaign signs, garage sale signs, those types of signs, in residential, areas, I think they're, defined, in here for those type of signs, if they were to be allowed, as being 3 square feet. Currently, as we have defined, freestanding versus portable signs, freestanding signs would no longer be allowed in residential zones in the public right of way. You could still have them in your lawn, to the number prescribed by the ordinance. But yeah, we didn't change the size requirement for freestanding signs or portables.
Is 3 square feet big enough to accommodate the normal ones that we have? I think they're 2 foot wide. That would mean they couldn't be more than 16 inches tall or so.
Typically, and like, I haven't gone out and measured one recently, but I don't think they're less than 2 feet tall, probably about 2 to 3 feet wide. So I think they're pretty close within 3 feet. They may be 16 inches tall. I haven't measured one. So but I haven't changed the size. I've left it the way it was in the ordinance.
Yeah, which is why I'm asking if we haven't had the proper sign in that size until now, and we're accepting them. And then in a few weeks, somebody points out that, hey, my neighbor's sign is over 3 square feet. Wouldn't we then have to enforce the law and go pick them all up? I mean.
Good point.
Could we maybe measure this? I've got some in the back of my truck. I don't know how big they are, but I'm pretty sure they're over 3 square feet. I'm sorry. Should we maybe look at that before we finish passing this legislation and make sure we have the right number in there? I think the city manager has an opinion on this, but.
You know, I'm a big fan of direct street level democracy. We should take a short recess and measure one of those signs.
I drove the wrong vehicle. I don't have my pickup here today.
But if an officer took you, you could go really fast with the lights on. Just for practice, of course.
So to be clear, it sounds like we want to address the sign sizes to whatever's out there already.
What about and I feel like I should have seen this in here, so correct me. What about the signs in the city limits that are in commercial zones that are allowed up to 6 square feet? Is that adjusted? I didn't see that. No.
Have made no adjustments yet on the sign sizes.
I do think though that rather than bringing the item back, if someone is nearby, and could go measure one, that literally could get this piece done tonight, one way or another.
Let's take about a 4-minute break. So I'm gonna call this back to order. It's decision time. Would somebody like to make a motion? And again,
Mayor, you should have to do a public hearing. And
Public hearing.
already closed the public comments. We have none. Correct? Thank you. Robert Soppy, you have the floor.
Good evening. My name's Robert Subby. I've provided written testimony on this subject already and will cover the suggestions that I raised, as well as raising some new comments. The Planning Commission approved a number of changes to the sign code, and you have those changes before you. While some of the changes are reasonable, I think others are creating new problems that need to be addressed. On my items 1 and 3, the issue has to do with the changes of the definition of minor freestanding and portable signs. I have no objection to all the redefinitions. My concern is that the implications of this don't appear to have been recognized, although I will comment they were recognized tonight. They were not at the Planning Commission. Your standard political sign or garage sale sign, based on what the Planning Commission handed to you, will be prohibited in the public right-of-way. I want to be clear about that. Between the sidewalk and the curb in a residential area, you will not be allowed to put a sign that says, vote for Mayor Rosacker, come to my garage sale, any of those things. They are prohibited. They are clearly defined, which I like in the new revisions, as minor freestanding signs. Our code only allows portable signs there. So this effectively prohibits those. Now that also happens downtown, which is not too much of an issue because there's concrete and you can't stick those signs in the ground very often. But there are trees down there that have soil around them, and those signs do get stuck in there. So those are also being prohibited. So if you want to prohibit those signs, that's fine. I just don't think that's appropriate. I think it's very reasonable to have those signs. The time restrictions. Let's look at downtown. Remember that the time restriction is on when the business is open. If I have a business that's open 24/7, see, I run it out of my house. If I can get a business owner to allow me to put my A-frame sign in front of their business, that sign can be there permanently. Is that what you want? No, when this was done years ago, when I was quite involved at the time, the idea was we don't want signs outside downtown. And the idea was 2 a.m. I think that it was like 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. That meant you can't leave the sign out there all the time. And 2 a.m. seemed like a reasonable enough time. You know, bars and other things may want to have signs. But again, if I have a 24/7 business, according to these revisions, I'm allowed to have my A-frame sign downtown forever, as long as I have a property owner that will allow me to place it there. I don't think that's appropriate. The time restrictions are also proposed to be removed in residential areas. Imagine what it takes then to enforce the code. If the only restriction is I can't have my garage sale sign out there more than 4 days in a row, code enforcement has to observe that sign each of those 4 days. So code enforcement can say, yes, it was out those 4 days. And then a 5th day. And now code enforcement can determine, yep, you violated the 4-day restriction. I think that's a huge burden to put on code enforcement. Part of the idea of having the nighttime restriction was that all one had to do was to observe it once outside those hours, and you could declare that the sign is in violation. I don't think that should be removed. It was asked where the 4 consecutive days came from. Give you a little history. About 10 years ago, the city was revising the sign code, having nothing to do with downtown or public right of way. It had to do with auto dealers at the east end of town. I'd been pushing for quite a while for revisions to the sign code. One of the things that I didn't like is back then, signs were prohibited in the public right of way outside of downtown. The only way you could put a garage sale sign or other signs in that right of way and follow the code was to get a permit from the city. And the city had a policy that we don't issue the permits. Well, clearly we were allowing those signs. Well, so I pushed and actually eventually wrote the first draft, and that's what we got. And I say I'm running out of time. I mentioned some other things. Oh, a big thing that got overlooked by myself and others, the Old Fashioned Festival and other such events. They can't put signs downtown most of the time because they're not open. And I think that needs to be considered. I've been pushing that issue for quite a number of years and it hasn't gotten any traction. What else do I want to cover here? Again, the rest of it is in, I did have a couple of cleanup things that have never taken traction. The idea that somebody has to replace bulbs as soon as possible, come on. Lots of things are possible. You don't really want to put that requirement. Similarly with rapid flashing, it ignores the technology of LEDs because basically it prohibits all of them. And I'll leave it there unless there are questions.
Thank you. All right, staff, we have some questions for you. I've got, Robert just brought one up. What part of this makes it so that we can't put our residential signs in the right of way?
Yes. So if we change the definition, if we change the definition of the freestanding sign, which would be a minor freestanding sign versus portable, to distinct them. It's always showed in the code. I think it's under section, I have to see it here. I think it's D. Let's see. That basically portable signs are allowed in the public right of way, but then any other sign would be prohibited unless specifically mentioned by code. So freestanding signs are one of those. As Mr. Seppi suggested, I think in one of his points in the paper that he submitted, I think in his point number 3, we could change portables in section 435-110D, change portable signs to portable or minor freestanding signs in that section, and then there'd be no change. I don't have any issue with that. There'd be no issue on so therefore in residential zones, you could still have the freestanding signs in the public right of way. That would be a simple change to that. As far as any concerns go to Old Fashioned Festival or special events like that, I think better fix or consideration would be to change the definition of temporary sign, because currently our temporary signs only speak to portable signs, which may have been an oversight, but we could just better define a temporary sign, which is temporary signs for events, which there's a section in the code that deals with that. Again, this is only dealing with the downtown area in like the tree wells or something. I don't think people like to see signs randomly stuck in there. So we left it at portable signs. Again, if we were worried about considering things like Old Fashioned Festival or special events, we could change the definition, temporary sign, be more inclusive, which should solve that problem.
Doesn't your first fix also solve that problem if you make it temporary signs and minor freestanding? Is that the right term?
In the section he was talking about, in the section where that would be changed, it would only deal with other zones, not the C2 or 3 zone. I guess we could change it. We changed it to allow them downtown. We could do that as well. wasn't something that I was considering doing. So that would allow, garage sale signs, political signs, any signs stuck downtown.
Yeah, welcome to writing legislation, right? One size fits all. Peggy?
One comment about the event signs downtown is the business owners put the posters in their windows. So people walking by see that. So to me, that eliminates the need for that downtown sidewalk area to be, I don't want to say cluttered, but filled with Old Fashioned Festival or the Rotary thing. That I think that would take care of it. I think it already is taken care of.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that.
Okay, so do you, well, go ahead, Elise.
So just so I'm I just want to make sure clarifying. So it would include political signs in the downtown corridor. Correct.
If we made the change, Mr. Suppi
Yeah.
suggests to that, then yes. Political signs, garage sale signs, any sign on a minor freestanding sign would be allowed as long as the business owner allowed it.
Let me just make sure I understand. From my point of view, I would like to, for residents to be able to put their signs out, but I'm not in support of the signs along downtown. I mean, I've already had complaints sent to me that there's too many signs all over town and it looks bad. So I want our community to look neat, but yet, however it's been before, I think.
I've lived in this town for quite a few years, and every time anybody has ever tried to address the sign ordinance, this is the kind of discussions we end up having. So do we need to maybe take just a little bit more time to understand what it is that we do and don't want? I mean, it seems that we all seem to know what we want. Do you know what we want?
I mean, my overall opinion on signs is that I hate them. And I think they should be allowed anywhere. Frankly, like, I don't think I don't want to be the person that told a property owner they can't put a sign up. I think they can put it wherever they want. I don't care. I do hate it, but, and same with downtown. I could get behind the downtown corridor. For reasons that Peggy shared around the events and not having the event signage down there, but I do think that I don't want I don't want restrictions on signs. I would actually probably go the opposite direction and have more leniency to our current code if I was going to take a stab at it. But that's my personal opinion.
So if we were to pass this, like down at Knapp's grocery store, I've seen political signs that's been out there in his hedgerow along 99W. So if we pass this, does that mean that somebody wouldn't be able to put signs out there? Is that would be, even though that's on his property? Because that hedgerow, I believe, is inside the sidewalk, so I'm assuming it's on his property.
So the answer to that question is it wouldn't prohibit it. So for the downtown corridor in that specific area that you're talking about, that's a resoluted highway, which we allow signage on property that's maintained by the city. So in that section, the city maintains basically just the sidewalk. Once you're past the sidewalk, going to the property, that's his property. So this would not affect signs on the private property other than the restrictions that are already there, how many per street frontage, the size it could be and whatnot. So if he allows political signs on his property, as long as he has the proper number and the proper size, that's up to him.
More question. I'm gonna ask this because we have Neil in the room too. When it pertains to this all sign code, my understanding has been that it's like to be in the ground. to address signs in the ground, but what about if someone, like a bit, I'm just trying to think of alternative ways, how is someone in a, right, like, could they put it a sandwich board, or could they put like I'm thinking political signs, I'm sorry, or like in a window, on a fence, I've seen people have, you know, how does this apply to beyond in the ground?
I'm going to answer that by saying that I guess it depends on where you're at. If we're talking about residential areas versus downtown, there's a difference. As far as residential areas, the proposed changes as we proposed them without any other, tweaks that we've already discussed, the definition of freestanding sign then would not be allowed in a residential area in the public right of way. It would not affect what you put on your private property. However, like I said, if we changed the one section to allow portable or freestanding signs in the public right of way outside of the downtown zone, then things would go the way they're at. I have no issue with that.
Yeah, I'd like to see that tweak made that officer just mentioned, is that the freestanding signs can be in the public right of way as well, outside of the downtown corridor. And I think taking the time frame off saves you a lot of hassle, which I also think is part of our goal, is to not have a time frame where people are calling you and complaining it's one day over, whatever. It seems to me like when the political season is over, the signs would come down logically, although I have seen others that haven't.
To be clear, so I understand. So as far as the time frame goes, taking off, the 4 days, not making it 7, just taking it out altogether. Is that what I'm understanding?
But I'm curious though, from both of Neil and Officer Running's perspective, like the intent behind this. I know I went through planning commission and everything, but the intent behind it, what is your thoughts and opinion as the people that are enforcing, what makes the most, because I do want to honor, like, if it's wasting Neil's time, right, to do things that are ridiculous, then I want to be respectful of that too.
Well, honestly, I can tell you that there are many aspects of the sign code and other codes that don't get addressed on a proactive basis. We have one code enforcement officer who works, usually during the days, flexes his schedule when necessary. So most of our complaints and issues we have, whether it be the sign code or fence code or site distance code, are complaint driven. And quite frankly, the only time I get complaints, or that we've gotten complaints, and Neil can correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of whether it's out past a certain time or it's been there for too many days, is during the political season. Period. I've never gotten a complaint. And though people do complain about garage sale signs on occasion that are put in the wrong place, I can't recall recently where I've had any time constraint issues or people complaining about the sign's been up forever. So that's my recall.
Well, I can tell you, as a member of the Rotary, there's very little that's gonna stop Rotarians from putting freestanding signs out along the road from time to time. So is that still gonna be allowed?
If we make that change, then we just talked about in terms of outside in the other zones, freestanding signs, it won't be an issue.
All right. Thank you for bringing the sign ordinance changes to us. Mike?
But as a Kiwanian, we're not concerned about that. Just to clarify.
And here I thought you were gonna make a motion, Mike. Would you like to make a motion?
Sure.
We're gonna read it by roll call, read it
gonna
by
read
title only and.
Yes. So I move that we adopt this ordinance 2024-2929 and read by title only.
We need the other motion first, Mike, the one to
Oh, okay, I move.
waive the second reading.
Okay, what now?
We have to
Oh,
waive the
okay.
second reading before we can move on.
Okay, I move that we waive the second reading.
Second that.
All right, it has been moved and seconded that we waive the second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, Mike, thank you. Now you're next one.
Oh, yeah. Do you got the stuff written down for the tweaking? If you do, why don't you do it?
So I move that we approve ordinance, the ordinance amending Title 15 Development Code related to signs with the tweak that allows, let me get the wording right, freestanding signs in the public right of way. Is that the right wording, officer? Minor?
Yeah, so in section, 435, 110D, we would change it to, for lots in other zones, 2 portable signs or 2 freestanding, minor freestanding signs per street frontage may be allowed in the public right of way.
I so move.
I'll second this. Okay. All right, so it has been moved and seconded that, yeah. I'm not gonna repeat it. Rachel, could we have a roll call vote, please? What? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, call your attention, did you intend for the amendment to delete the time frame limitation altogether? Is that correct? Outside of the C3 zones, I'm sorry.
All right, let's restate this motion. Who would like to try? Peggy?
I move we approve an ordinance amending Title 15 Development Code related to signs as presented with 2 exceptions. One is that minor freestanding signs would also be allowed in the public access, is that public right of way? And that the time limit in the code would be eliminated. The 4-day, pardon me, by title only, of course, yes.
Not be for lots or lots outside of the C3 and C4
Yes,
district.
outside of C3 and C4.
James, would you like to read the title?
Okay, in front of the council for adoption is ordinance number 2024-2929, an ordinance amending Title 15 Development Code related to signs with amendments as proposed by Councilor Kilberg.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor signify, oh, I'm sorry, this has to be a roll call vote.
Counselor McBride,
Yes.
Counselor Wheatley,
Yes.
Counselor Yarnell Holloman. Yes. Counselor Kilberg,
Yes.
Mayor Rosacker,
Yes.
and that's 5.
Yes, sir.
You've now had the same city manager long enough to see the sign code come back twice.
Well, let's do our best not to bring it back a third time. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, moving on to new business. Where are you going, Sergeant Ronnie? Now we're gonna talk about vehicle code update. All right, we're ready to hear about the abandoned vehicle code update.
All right, so our staff, and the Traffic Safety Committee, primarily Sergeant Hagan, and I think he's out on the road right now. That's why he's not here. Had identified some issues with our current vehicle storage and abandoned vehicle code. Trying to make things a little more efficient. Currently, we have a storage on the street code that prohibits storage of any vehicle on the street for more than 72 hours. On its face, it's pretty unreasonable for people to have more than one vehicle and only one parking space to park it. And it creates a lot of complaints. Yeah, Sergeant Hagan?
You really need me out there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
I'm
scared.
And it might be better if I defer to Sergeant Hagan, he can run you through the process, how it got there. He's a lot more elegant at that than I am, and I can probably explain the changes then a little better. You want to just talk about the actual process you
Sure.
got to change?
Yeah, I didn't bring any notes with me, sorry, but this really started maybe a year or so ago with a citizen who had come into our Traffic Safety Commission who had asked some questions about some abandoned vehicles and some frustrations that they were having with some abandoned vehicles in their neighborhood. And some questions were raised about, why aren't the police officers more active with enforcing that type of thing? And I had just had an honest conversation with some folks on the Traffic Safety Commission, and then that citizen really talked about how our ordinance was really missing some teeth to be proactive with that type of a complaint, and so that we're not wasting our time out there spilling our wheels and just repeating the same, chasing our tail with with these types of complaints. There's really some loopholes that exist where if somebody calls in an abandoned car in their neighborhood, and of course, on the surface level, a citizen or someone might just say, well, the police officers can just go out there and run their license plate and write the car a ticket and eventually have it towed, and that's going to solve the issue. Well, there's other things at play there where a lot of people, when they take possession of a car, they don't properly register it. Therefore, we're writing a parking ticket to somebody who used to own the car, and that doesn't seem fair to us. And
Or plates or VINs are obscured.
correct. So then there's another variable where you have the ordinance of a storage of a vehicle on the street, which was like a 72-hour window of time. We found ourselves getting caught up in kind of some neighborhood issues where people might not get along necessarily with their neighbor. And when their kid goes on spring break for the week, all of a sudden they're calling and saying that their kid's car is parked for more than 72 hours in the neighborhood. Well, that isn't a good use of our time, I don't think. And I don't think that's certainly where the citizens and the city council would want your police officers to be doing. We don't want to be in the business of towing people's cars inappropriately. So we really wanted to focus on this ordinance, sharpen it a little bit, compare some of the other ordinances in the local jurisdictions to see what works for them, and maybe we could adopt some of that here so that the citizens of Newberg can have confidence that their police officers are out making the best use of our time and not penalizing the wrong people, and hopefully catching up and holding people accountable who are actually the ones who are making the offense. So.
And ultimately, it came down to definitions. Abandoned vehicle wasn't really properly defined in the current code. It was referred to as we had referenced this discarded vehicles, which had a little better definition, but wasn't all inclusive. We took traffic safety and Sergeant Hagan's suggestions, presented them to legal to have them go over with the changes that we wanted to see to make better definitions. And we were actually adding sections to the code, deleting other sections. After getting it back from legal, they found that they could use our existing code with some deletions and minor changes of language, other large deletions. But ultimately, it better defines discarded vehicles and gives us more direct options, so we're not going to be dealing with the same vehicles over and over. Oftentimes would happen, we would cite or address a vehicle that was called in as abandoned or discarded. Somebody would just, wait just before we towed it, push it down the street, and we have to start all over again. So we wanted to eliminate that issue. With the language we kept back from legal in your red line thing, you can see the changes pretty clearly there and how that's addressed. I think the new amended code will eliminate a lot of those loopholes. I think we pressed for originally trying to get some loopholes up. Like if we dealt with this vehicle more than 2 or 3 times, that we could just immediately tow it. We were advised by legal that shouldn't be really possible. I tended to agree with them, but I think we also have enough leeway based on ORS, which our code is based upon, that's allow us to deal with those type of issues specifically. So that said, I think we also changed the 72 hours to a 7-day period. This helps with police officers being more efficient and being able to get back to it through their work week. It also eliminates, the kid that went on spring break, getting complaints from the neighbors, gives us a little more leeway to address abandoned or other discarded issues that are, they're on the line, to have us more discretion to start addressing those as abandoned, just with a little more effort on our part. If we actually have to tow someone's car who's in the neighborhood, requires more notice and written notice on our part. That's pretty much where we're at.
All right, does anybody have any questions? Okay. So this, I'm gonna need to back up again. This is a legislative hearing. We have no public testimony on this subject, is that correct? All right, so I'm closing public testimony. Recommendation from the staff.
Recommend that we adopt the proposed ordinance as written.
What up? And council deliberations. Anybody have any questions for the officers? Okay. So
I
we're.
guess I have one. If someone proactively, I think I know this answer, but for the record, if someone proactively reaches out to you to inform that, hey, we have this car that is broken down that we're going to be working on within a certain period of time, would that satisfy the concern that it's not an abandoned vehicle, that the person is in fact, maybe they can't afford to get their car fixed for 2 weeks or something? Would there be a process that the person could follow correctly and within the code?
Well, in terms of code and code enforcement, what I would have them do is, and I'm sure Officer Winter would do the same thing, as we look for alternatives. Is there any way that this vehicle can be removed from the street and whatnot? To do that, obviously, we're going to consider hardship. We want compliance. We don't want to go out and start, just citing people just because they're in technical violation of the code. So yeah, I'm sure there could be certain exceptions, but we're going to work with them to get them within the code as best we can.
That's great.
Well,
I just wanted to register with the public listening along that, interestingly, I have never received a customer service complaint about our police department in 3 years. So the way that they handle these matters must be very deft and very aware of the community.
all right, before we go any further, I skipped a step, declaration of conflicts of interest or abstentions. Any of the counselors have? None declared, okay. So we're down to decision time. And, I think the first motion we'd like is to waive the second reading.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we waive the second reading.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we waive the second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, now would you like to make a motion?
Okay. I move that we adopt ordinance, oh gosh, really? Where is it? Okay. 2024, 29, 27.
Second.
By title only.
By title only. James, your cue. Would you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before the council for adoption is ordinance number 2024-2927, an ordinance amending Title 10, Chapter 10.15, Article 1, Newberg Municipal Code, Section 10.15.030, and Title 8, Chapter 8.05, Newberg Municipal Code, Sections 8.05.020, 8.05.060, 8.05.070, and 8.05.080.
All right. We have a motion on the table. I'm sorry, we need a roll call vote.
Counselor McBride,
Yes.
Counselor Wheatley,
Yes.
Counselor Yarnell Holloman,
Yes.
Counselor Kilburg,
Yes.
Mayor Rosacker.
Yes.
It's 5-0.
All right, thank you. All right, it is time to deal with our request for appeal of a planning commission order. This is a quasi judicial hearing. James, take it away. Actually, before you do that, let me get some of the paperwork out of the way here. I now open the public hearings for the quasi judicial hearing. Call for abstentions, bias, ex parte contests, and objections to jurisdiction. Does any counselor have any of those two? Counselor Wheatley.
I did watch the planning commission meeting where they discussed this. I forgot about the ex parte context, so just want to let you know that.
Was there correspondence with uh, um, the
No.
applicant or, okay?
No.
It was just a viewing of the
I
planning
forgot
commission.
about the ex
Okay.
parte. I was just, yeah, totally forgot.
Okay.
So that means we're clear and Robin can vote and take part in the measure. Okay. So now it is time for the staff report.
Mr. Mayor, which James are you queuing? Me
Come on.
for the attorney announcements or James DeWolfer?
Do you have any more attorney announcements?
I do have an announcement.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So certain announcements are required before the commencement of a quasi judicial land use hearing. This hearing deals with the short-term rental application for 215 North School Street. The announcement required by the Oregon Revised Statutes, RS 197.797, is as follows. The applicable substantive criteria for the decision are listed in the staff report under Exhibit A1 to draft order number 2024-0046 and Exhibit B1 to draft order number 2024-0046, which are attached to the council agenda. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the criteria described above or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation that you believe applies to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action or an action for damages in circuit court. The applicant, who has the burden of proof, may have at least 7 days after the record is closed to all other parties to submit final written argument. At the close of the testimony portion of the hearing, the applicant will have to decide if the applicant wishes to submit further written argument. And the following definitions apply with respect to that further written argument. These are under ORS 197.797. Argument means assertions and analysis regarding the satisfaction or violation of legal standards or policy believed relevant by the proponent to a decision. Argument does not include facts. Evidence means facts, documents, data, or other information offered to demonstrate compliance or non-compliance with standards believed by the proponent to be relevant to the decision. Any submission by the applicant after the record is closed must be limited to argument. no additional evidence can be submitted. If the applicant wishes to make final written argument, no further deliberation shall take place tonight. If the applicant waives that right, the council may proceed with deliberation. And that concludes the attorney announcements, Mr. Mayor.
All right, James Dingwall, time for the staff report.
All right, okay. Good evening, council. My name is James Dingwall, one of the assistant planners for the city, and we are going to discuss the appeal of Planning Commission Order 2024-5 for the approval of CUP 2319 for a vacation rental at 215 North School Street. So we'll start with some background information on the application, then review the criteria and condition being appealed. So the applicant is Teresa Drevdahl, who received approval for a vacation rental home at 215 North School Street from the Planning Commission on July 11th, subject to conditions of approval. One of the conditions was that the use as a vacation rental home would be limited to 2 months per year, which the applicant is appealing tonight. The subject property is located in the R2 medium density residential zoning district, and the applicable criteria for the approval were Newberg Municipal Code 15-225-60, the conditional use permit criteria, and 15-445-300, which includes the special use standards for vacation rental homes. So again, the property is located in the R2 medium density residential zoning district in downtown Newberg, just south of the Salem Cultural Center and east of the Newberg Public Library. And there's a parking facility, an alley to the south, and residential uses to the east. So to summarize the appeal procedure before you tonight, you may affirm, reverse, or modify in whole or in part a determination or requirement of the decision that is under review. And if you choose to modify or reverse the Planning Commission decision, the code requires the council make a finding and state its reasons for taking that action. If this is the decision that you take, staff will update the order recitals in the Exhibit A orders to come back to have the mayor sign once that finding is inserted. So starting with the conditional use criteria in NMC 15-225-60, the first criteria is that the location, size, design, and operating characteristics are reasonably compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and will have minimal impacts on livability or appropriate development of abutting properties in the surrounding neighborhood, with consideration given to harmony in scale, bulk, coverage, and density, to the availability of public facilities and utilities, to the generation of traffic and the capacity of surrounding streets, and to any other relevant impacts of the development. The staff report finding discussed that the proposed use as a vacation rental home is located in an existing single-family home with 3 bedrooms. And a little nuance here, the applicant submitted a change of use permit to the building division to increase the number of permitted bedrooms in the structure to 5. This is the result of a process that planning has developed with the building division in response to a number of applicants for vacation rental homes applying for a certain number of bedrooms, but not having a matching record either with the city or with the Yamhill County Assessor's Office, indicating that there are actually that number of bedrooms that meet the code requirements in the house. This application and applicant is the first of those to utilize this new pathway, as opposed to simply receiving the approval from the Planning Commission for the lower number of bedrooms. Because of this permit, the Planning Commission approval was for 3 bedrooms, but up to 5 upon approval by the building official in this alternate pathway. The subject property also provides 2 off-street parking spaces, and staff found that the use is compatible with other residential uses, as it is similar in size and scope to regularly rented or owned dwellings. This evaluation of the use has been consistently applied to vacation rental home applications, evaluating that proposed use as a vacation rental to existing single-family dwellings. For example, where apart from the duration of the physical use of the structure as a dwelling is similar in occupancy, or for example, that the single-family dwelling in our code requires 2 parking spaces, the vacation rental requires 2 parking spaces. Planning Commission has had previous discussions on how this livability conditional use criteria is implemented, and has noted that livability is a subjective definition, as some of you have heard and discussed either with the ad hoc short-term rental committee or at the listening session. Uh, and it may likely be a part of a future code amendment work to update the vacation rental home code. Until the code is changed, staff's evaluation of these conditional use permits has sought to focus on the similarity and compatibility of the use itself between the vacation rental and regular residential use. The Planning Commission heard testimony from the applicant and one public comment opposed to the application. In their evaluation of this criteria, the Planning Commission's discussion considered the subjectivity of evaluating minimal impact on livability, the location of the subject property in proximity to the downtown, density of other vacation rentals approved in the area, and the impact of parking of vacation rentals, and also the applicant's stated narrative, and sought to address these impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. As a conditional use permit, NMC 15225 gives the hearing body the authority to designate conditions deemed necessary to secure the purpose of the conditional use chapter and the criteria, among which is duration of use, or that such other conditions as will make possible the development of the city in an orderly and efficient manner in conformity with the Newberg Comprehensive Plan and Newberg Development Code. So I can provide additional details on those types of conditions that are available to the hearing body if you have further questions on that choice that the Planning Commission made. The Planning Commission found that the full-time operation of this additional vacation rental would create a negative impact on the livability of the surrounding neighborhood due to the density of existing vacation rentals, and determined that use as a part-time vacation rental constituted a minimal impact on the livability of abutting properties. This limitation was identified from the application materials, where the applicant indicated that the subject property was their primary residence and intended to use the home as a vacation rental 6 to 8 weeks during the summer and not as a full-time year-round vacation rental, as it would be owner occupied at least 10 months per year. The Planning Commission evaluated adding this duration 2-month limitation as a condition of approval, as conditional use permits run with the land. So the intent of the owner could change, or if they sell the property, the vacation rental approval would run with the new owner, who may not have the same intent. As staff discussed implementation of this condition imposed by the Planning Commission, it was determined that the 2 months would be limited to 2 full months per year, chosen and communicated to community development by the applicant, rather than identifying, for example, 60 days out of the year as the clearest implementation of the Planning Commission's express condition of approval. The second conditional use criteria is that the location, design, and site planning of the proposed development will provide a convenient and functional living, working, shopping, or civic environment, and will be as attractive as the nature of the use and its location and setting warrants. This subject property is located in downtown Newberg and is in close proximity to the Salem Cultural Center, George Fox University, in the downtown business district. And as discussed previously, the proposed use is similar in size and scope to a long-term rental or an owner-occupied dwelling. The third and final criteria for a conditional use permit is that the proposed development be consistent with code, which staff found, in addition to being compatible with other residential uses, will be discussed in the next slide. So NMC 15445-300 contains the special use standards for vacation rental homes. This includes that a vacation rental must be a single-family dwelling, which the subject property is, that the rental be registered with the city and pay transient lodging tax, which the applicant indicated they will complete, and that they post contact information that the applicant indicated they will do. There are also standards identified, which include that a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces be provided, which are provided at the driveway of this property, limits the maximum occupancy to 2 guests per bedroom. The approval from the Planning Commission limits the maximum occupancy to 6 guests, pending building official approval of the change of use permit, at which point it could be updated to a maximum of 10 if there are 5 bedrooms. Weekly waste collection will occur, and the premises will not include occupied RVs, tents, or other temporary shelters during the rental occupancy. So the special use standards for vacation rental homes are met. So staff's recommendation is that the council consider the request to appeal Planning Commission Order 2024-5 and make a motion to deny the appeal to uphold Planning Commission Order 2024-5, maintaining the existing conditions of approval, which is Exhibit A of the packet you received tonight, or to approve the appeal, which adopts City Council Order 2024-46 and approves the conditional use permit as previously recommended by staff, which is the order as written in Exhibit B. So you had two parallel orders in the packet tonight. And beyond this recommendation by staff, you may choose to modify in whole or in part any part of that of the determination of requirement from the Planning Commission. But if reversed or modified, we would ask that you make a finding with the motion with the reasons and rationale for that reversal or modification. So after all that, happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Robin.
I'm wondering if or if the applicant has gotten approval from the building inspector for the 5 bedrooms. What's the
That
status on that?
permit is still in building plan review as kind of a high level overview. Kind of as we've been kind of working out this new system, the original plan was that an applicant could have an external contractor, architect, verify and submit to the building official. But as the process went on, and this land use action has had its 120-day limit extended as the applicant and cities kind of work through this process. The building official now is requesting plans to be approved prior to inspection. So the applicant has submitted those plans and they're being currently reviewed by the building division. And once the plans are approved, the building official will go back out, re-inspect the property and make a decision at that point.
Mike?
So I'm just wanting to make sure I understand this. The owner is going to be owner occupied and she was wanting to initially have it be used 6 to 8 weeks out of the year. Correct?
But I think so. The application materials indicated that I believe that they are here to make a public comment, so we'll let them speak as well. Part of the reason that it was conditioned is just the difference between like the intent versus the binding nature of the approval itself.
So right now, ask whatever questions to James. Then we're gonna hear from the public comments. We have one opposed. And I don't think we have anybody for, but the applicant is also here and we'll have the opportunity for you to ask them those questions as well.
So what is the normal procedure for these vacation rentals? Is there normally some type of restriction put on that you can only do it 2 months or you can do it 5 months or 6 months? Or is it just case by case?
So as far as I'm aware, and Clay or Scott can add here as well, I do not believe that the Planning Commission has imposed additional conditions thus far. Staff recommended conditions generally are the special use standards for parking spaces, trash collection, occupancy. But as a conditional use permit, the Planning Commission has the option to impose those conditions, and there's a list of about 10 or 12 beyond the one that they chose that we can talk about. But this is, I believe, the first case that they've chosen to impose a duration condition in this case, kind of in that realm of the conditional use evaluation.
All right, James, thank you. Don't go anywhere. We may need you in a minute. Right now, we don't have any proponents signed up. We have
The applicant has the proponent and you have the form.
this says applicant. Okay, then we have, so Robert, you're up. I'm assuming you're opposed? You're up.
Good evening. My name's Robert Seppi, and I'd first like to request to be designated as the primary opponent so I can get some additional time. I hope to be done within 5 minutes, but sometimes I get a little long-winded. Can that be allowed?
Well, let's, yeah, most likely, yes. Let's go ahead and see what we got here.
Okay. My name's Robert Suppy. I provided you written testimony today. That's the same as what I emailed you. I want my testimony to focus exactly on the code 15-225-060. That is code that must be met by the applicant for you to approve this. If that isn't met, you're to deny it. In that, Section A includes that, quote, "The proposed development shall have minimal impact on the livability of the neighborhood." I'd like to show that I don't think that's the case. In addition, the capacity of surrounding streets must be considered. I think that's also a problem. These are not my standards. These are the standards of the Newberg Code that have to be met. I also want to emphasize the applicant has the burden to show that it is being met. I don't have the burden to show that it's not. If the applicant does not adequately show to you that these standards are being met, then you're not to approve this. As you've seen before, back up. This area is very dense in terms of vacation rentals. It's a nice, I live a block and a half away. This is personal to me. You've seen the heat map that the city staff came up for you a while ago. This is the core of it. Across the street from it, 3 out of the 4 properties are vacation rentals. That has a real impact on the livability. One more is going to impact it even further. I have a couple of vacation rentals right across and around the corner from me. The owners are excellent people. They try very hard to follow the rules and to accommodate the neighborhood. The problem is, it's not poor management. It's the mere nature of vacation rental that impacts the neighborhood. For example, I live on a narrow street. People drive up on the curb and park on the planter strip to provide more space. I don't like that on my side of the street. I don't like my planter strip being torn up. I don't like the fact that at some point my curb's going to fail and I'm the one financially responsible for fixing it. That isn't cheap. I've talked to my neighbors about this in the past. Neighbors get it. Neighbors don't park on my planter strip. But when you have somebody that's just there for the weekend, for the only time in their life, they don't know that. And I don't want to go disrupt people that are trying to have a good time in Newberg, but they're planting on my lawn. The parking has gone way up since we've had these vacation rentals. We also have, because it's a narrow street, for safety reasons, we have a long yellow strip of the curb. This is for safety reasons. That frequently gets blocked. Neighbors don't do that. People that live there don't do that. It's people that are there. And these aren't bad people. I mean, don't get me wrong, but this is the nature of a vacation rental. Those are just 3 examples. There are many other things that make it minimal. Parking is to be considered. That is a requirement. This property is right across the street from the cultural center. The cultural center has large events. When it has those large events, parking for numerous blocks away from it have 0 free spaces. I've done many walkthroughs during and after events, counted cars afterwards, made spreadsheets and shown that numerous blocks, if you come home during the event, you got to park blocks away. Well, think about how this property is going to impact that. They're allowed 10 occupants. Think of how many cars that is. But remember, an occupant is somebody that spends the night. You could have 10 people come there, invite many of their friends because there's an event going on at the cultural center that they all want to go to. All those cars are going to impact this parking blocks away. I don't consider that minimal, and I don't consider that being consideration of the parking. Yes, there is a requirement for 2 off-street parking spaces, but that's only one of the parking requirements. The other, as I said, is that you have to consider the impact on the neighborhood. I should also mention that the cultural center was given a 70% reduction in its parking requirement. You look at city code as to what they should have in off-street parking, 70% of that got thrown out. And this is part of why we have such a big hit on parking when there are big events. 10, one of the things the council could do, it doesn't fix the other problems, but at least with the parking and the conflict with the cultural center, is you could restrict this property so that it can't be rented as a vacation rental when these large events are happening at the cultural center. Unfortunately, I would think that's one of the prime times to rent it, when you got this cool event going on across the street. One of the issues that gets brought up a lot on vacation rentals is property owners' rights. Well, the key is you have code you have to rule on. If you think that that code is too restrictive and that property owners shouldn't have to live up to it, then the solution is to change the code, not to ignore it. It doesn't, that code has to be met. So anyway, my recommendation is to deny the application because it does not meet 15.225.060. But if you're not willing to do that, then I think you should limit it such that it's not allowed to be rented on days that are where the cultural center is having big events. And I was going to mention on my parking studies, if anybody's interested, I'll be glad to share the methodology, the numbers, and the so on. But anyway, parking is a huge problem around there. This will make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I'm gonna guess. Steve? I'm not gonna try. No. Elzinga. So you are the owner of the property. I know that the decision by the planning commission was conditioned based on exactly the item that Robert is talking about. I also know that you were not, I'm sorry. I know that they went with what you said in your original application, which was that you were only going to rent it 2 months out of the year. And they gave you the restriction based on that. So I guess the big primary question for us is, why isn't that acceptable? It seemed like it was a good compromise based on your original application.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Steve Elzinga, and I represent the applicant, Teresa Drebdahl, who's in the back here. And we're just appealing one condition. Condition number one, we accept all the other conditions. And just going right to the heart of the matter, if you look at the wording of the condition, first of all, there's several reasons there's a problem. When you look at the wording where it says restricted to 2 months, it's unclear what that means. Does that mean that, as James alluded to earlier, that it could be 60 days scattered throughout the year? Does that mean that it's 2 specific months like August or July? If so, which 2 months? When is it decided? Can it change from time to time? There's a variety of issues there. And this is really the result of what happens when you kind of legislate on the fly, which is what happened at the Planning Commission. The public hearing was closed, the Planning Commission deliberated, and there was no engagement with the property owner despite her being present and raising her hand asking to participate. And Ms. Drebdahl believes that, reasonable people can sit down and have reasonable discussions and come to reasonable solutions. And so if there's an interest in conditions, we'd asked for an opportunity to dialogue with you on those conditions. I think it's really important, though, that you understand the background here, which is that, first of all, this is not the first time that Ms. Drebdahl has lived in this neighborhood. She owned a house in the neighborhood in the 90s. And in fact, she fixed up that old abandoned house and won the 1995 Beautification Award for that, that work that she mostly did herself because she did not have much of a budget to do those renovations. She's thrilled to be back in the neighborhood and she is committed to its success. This is also not a typical short-term rental. What Ms. Drebdahl is designing is a an art-focused rental that will have pieces from Europe as well as locally, some hundreds of years old, that will be curated throughout every room in the house. And so she has a very strong financial incentive to make sure that she's only renting to reasonable people who take care of the property. That will flow out to the outside into the garden with a fountain, et cetera. And if you look at this handout that was distributed, you can see the zoning of the property. And I'd ask you to strongly consider where this property is located. You have just half a block south is Highway 99. Immediately south is a parking lot. That's her neighbor to the south. Her neighbor to the west is the library. To the north is the cultural center. And as you all know, Sheridan Street gets shut down here for the Lavender Festival for Tuesday nights, et cetera. This is pretty much the ideal spot of any spot in the city. If you're thinking about where would you want a short-term rental to be located, this is right on the edge of the business district. This is exactly where you want them to be located, not further out in the heart of a residential area. And all we're asking is that you return to what the staff report originally recommended to the Planning Commission, which is conditions that do not include the 2 months and conditions that are consistent with other decisions that have been made by the city recently. And if you look at the second handout we have, these are the last 2 decisions from the Planning Commission, 2004-04, 2004-03. The most recent 2 before this one. Neither of these approvals has any sort of time limit condition. We asked that you act in fairness and equity consistent with those. Additionally, our third packet, which you're all familiar with because you've recently done the listening session on short-term rentals, the city has taken a comprehensive look at short-term rental policy, and everything from the ad hoc committee, from the Planning Commission, and from the staff report, all throughout that, not one word in here of this entire document, of all the documents related to time limits on short-term rentals. We ask that the city return to the comprehensive policy approach that you have been taking. This condition that adopted by the Planning Commission is a one-off. It's an outlier, and it's inconsistent with the city's prior decisions. And so we ask that you, in fairness, apply the law equitably and equally and remove the condition on the 2 months.
Okay, I have many questions.
Sure.
Okay, so I looked at her application. We have in our packet, it said it would be, her house would be used for 6 to 8 weeks out of the year. That's it.
Right.
So I feel that that's why the Planning Commission approved it for 6 to 8 weeks. So then I read her appeal and it's completely different. So I'm not saying that's going to change my vote, but we're going from night and day here. What, 6 to 8 weeks to, and that's what the Planning Commission, oh, she only wants it 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, well, we'll do it for 6 to 8 weeks. And then when they came down with that, based on what she requested, then she comes back and says that's too restrictive. Now she has several dates and she has a plan. I mean, she's been working with the city. Why didn't she do a supplemental, come to them and say, hey, I have this new idea. I want to change my plan. I'm just seeing 6 to 8 weeks to getting the decision, and then it's too restrictive. So it's very confusing. I mean, so maybe you can explain what happened there.
Happy to do so. So there's a fundamental assumption that the Planning Commission made that's different than what Ms. Drepdel made. And part of this is, she's not an attorney. She'll acknowledge that. She's the art expert. That's why she asked me to come here to help her. So when she's doing a short-term rental, she's not renting it out for like 6 to 8 weeks straight, right? It's when she was originally looking at that, she's thinking, there's 2 days here, there's 1 day here, there's 4 days here. And so it's not just, 2 straight months only during those 2 months. It's got to be spread throughout the year. So that's the first assumption. The second is that, again, with the planning commission, she never got the opportunity to have this discussion. And thank you so much for asking the question, because this was never any engagement in front of the planning commission. Yeah, sorry.
She did have a discussion. Am I able to voice that I did watch that meeting? Is that okay? Can I? James?
Yes, Counselor Wheatley, you can bring forth during this hearing what you observed.
Okay, so I did watch that and she did give testimony and she did not mention that she was changing her idea. She simply was giving, making the point that it was a commercial area and that that's where a short-term rental would have been. So at no time when she had I mean, I've watched many of these and people, you know, say exactly what they're gonna do and she did not mention change of plans, so.
That's
She
absolutely.
did have a chance to speak that.
You're correct. She did testify before the planning commission. There was no discussion during the public hearing of any sort of 2-month limit. And so that's what I'm referring to, that the public hearing was closed. The planning commission discussed a 2-month limit. She attempted to, effectively, what she didn't know she was asking, but what she was really asking was, could they reopen the public hearing so that she could comment on that? And she didn't have the opportunity to do so. Totally understand. She's not an attorney. She didn't know the right procedural objection.
So basically what the applicant is asking for is to go 8 weeks, but it's spread out, day here, 2 days here, 5 days there. Is that correct? Throughout the year?
What we're asking for is that the condition number 1 be removed and that it be treated just like all the other short-term rentals without a time limit condition, which is inconsistent with the policy that the city has been discussing for months.
So, Steve, are you the applicant?
No, I'm representing the applicant.
You're representing the applicant,
Yes.
okay. So the criteria that the planning commission used is right there in front of you. And according to your application, you only needed it for 6 to 8 weeks. So that's what they acted on. And they again gave what seems to be a reasonable condition. So I understand that the applicant was not given another opportunity to rebut that. That's what we're asking for here. Is there a possibility that your applicant would like to rebut that specific? I mean, this is what we're judging right now today, not you guys, not the project, not anything about it. We're trying to determine if the planning commission made an error by not allowing her to rebut the seemingly reasonable condition that they placed on the application.
Mr. Mayor, this appeal is not preconditioned on there having been a procedural error. There was a procedural error, but that's not terribly relevant because anyone has the right to appeal. And so the first thing I would say on the 2 months is, as mentioned earlier, at a minimum, it should be 60 days spread throughout the year, just in terms of clarifying the wording, because 2 months is not workable for the way a short-term rental is normally run, and it's inconsistent with normal business practices. And so that's absolute minimum. But in addition to that, we don't feel that having a specifically imposed time limit is necessary, given that it's inconsistent with long-standing city policy discussions on short-term rentals. And if you're going to say, well, we really feel that there has to be some sort of time limit, I guess what we would ask then is that it be a little bit more flexible in terms of realizing that when you're running a business, some years are higher, some years are lower. And what the condition is doing is it's setting a cap that applies to all years. And so if, that cap was, less than half the year or something like that, that would be much more workable in terms of just business operations.
So I'm wrestling with this because, one, I don't want to step on private owners' rights. I'm a big proponent of that. But if the application was filled out 6 to 8 weeks, that's what the applicant was gonna rent the facility, then it seems like if we left the 2 months or set a maximum of 60 days spread out throughout the year, we're basically agreeing to what the applicant originally was asking for. Unless I'm missing something somehow. And I mean, I would agree. I wouldn't want to see 2 months, because what are those 2 months? Is it July? Is it August? I'd say, 60 days spread throughout the year based on market, what the market's gonna determine and how people want to come and visit this area. So would that be something if we just took out the 2 months and said 60 days used however you desire throughout the year? Would that be agreeable? Am I getting to the intent of what the application seemed to allude to?
I think you're moving in the right direction. That's certainly preferable to the current condition because that clarifies the ambiguous wording. But the applicant would still request that there be a little bit more wiggle room on that for up and downs of the market.
I think this question might be for Clay or James. Does the application that people who want to have a vacation rental, does that application ask how much time they project that their home would be rented throughout the year? Is that a question on the application? Well, she might have offered it without.
So the application form does not, it provides an opportunity for the applicant to provide a project statement, which I believe is where that item was written, but there's not a specific question about usage. And I think one comment also is as far as the 2 month versus 60 days, as staff was determining how to implement that, that was a decision made based on the language of the planning commission of 2 months per year, and also the implementation or the ability of staff to accurately track and record days versus months. So kind of a dual of the language of the planning commission and also practicality of how the operation of managing that sort of limitation would work on the city side.
So have other applicants in the past indicated what they estimate the time frame would be for how many days a year their home would be rented?
Not on other applications I've seen, like any other.
We've had a limited number of people characterize what they plan on doing, and it's usually in general terms. And it doesn't come up in the general discussion at the planning commission level very often. Typically, it's just if there is a characterization, it's more likely to be something along the lines of, this is my primary dwelling. I plan on using it when I'm traveling. I'm a traveling nurse and I use it for this. And so they do some level of ballparking, but they don't give us a number. And the only other situation is where they say that they're doing something where we use as home share. If they say that it's a room that they're renting rather than the entire building. And so that's another type of ballparking they do to characterize the use.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, to me, it seems like maybe the applicant obviously made a mistake and the appeal is kind of a do-over. Is that, so we could look at the appeal as maybe a fresh, I mean, obviously, right? We could just, am I looking at this correctly? Like the appeal is a new application.
Yeah,
So
so
whatever happened before is,
as the slide indicated with Rachel, could you go back to the options slide? So city council can either affirm, overturn or modify any part of the planning commission decision. And I think also of note is kind of there are two pathways for kind of this do-over. One is the appeal. The other would be a modification to the conditional use permit, which wouldn't have the time limitation of an appeal. But the applicant chose to pursue this one as opposed to that modification process.
And the other thing that I would add is, as the applicant's representative stated, one of the things that the planning commission chose not to do is to reopen the public hearing. So testimony was given to both the members of the public, proponents and opponents, and then they closed the public hearing and chose not to reopen it. So they deliberated amongst themselves, they made their finding and did those things. And so now this is the opportunity for the city council, should you choose to engage in that conversation, you can do that if you think that's a pathway that you do want to explore with the applicant and their representative, then that's open to you. But that's at your discretion.
So can you tell me on any other applicants that have filed to have their homes like this, do they have to meet this parking code that Mr. Suppi brought up? Is that something that is everybody else goes over and they passed it, and for some reason, does the planning commission feel that they haven't passed that hurdle?
Would you like to start, Jim?
So, yeah, so the conditional use criteria is applicable to all of the conditional use permits, vacation rentals and other uses in zones where it's applicable. Staff's evaluation of vacation rentals thus far has chosen to focus on that more kind of use, apples to apples of a single family dwelling versus vacation rental. And I think planning commission has noted and deliberated about the livability and the implementation thus far, and then just chose this time to add that condition as a condition that makes this a minimal impact, but has not chosen to previously.
And so what I would add too is something foundational to the type of permit that's being requested and why it was going to the planning commission in the first place. It's a conditional use permit. It is supposed to be evaluated by the discretionary body when they're making their discretionary decision to make sure that those impacts and those issues, those compatibilities are met. And it does those when needed through conditions. That is what that means. And so because something like a vacation rental was determined in our procedures that it could have impacts to the surrounding areas with the code that we have, that's why it's given this type of a permit and this type of a procedure. And so you've got these large subjective conditions that need, or criteria that need to be evaluated. And we have some language in here that Mr. Suppi was talking about. Only about a third of the vacation rental hearings that go to the planning commission have any public comments whatsoever. The majority don't receive public comments. The neighbors are not worried about it, or hopefully they're aware, but they haven't made something where they're necessarily concerned about it. But then there are others where they do, and the planning commission has been continuing to wrestle with those. And I don't think that this condition is the only signal that they've been trying to wrestle with some of those
Right.
public comments that they're hearing and some of the observations that we're making. It's just an outcome as they continue to learn more and dig into this. And so what I would say is that you've got a member of the public that was there talking about a high density or a high number of operations there. The planning commission has seen the recent mapping and other things about those activities and heard that there are impacts when they heard from this member of the public. So they were trying to do that. And so that's what I think is reflected in the finding that they made getting to the condition. Is that the only way that the condition could have been worded or drafted or conducted to get to something for the applicant to mitigate that problem? Probably not. There's probably lots of ways that it could have been sliced. Now, one of the things that I would say is that if your council wants to do something different, so be it. But one of the questions that would need to be evaluated is there actually a problem that needs mitigation? And that was what I think the planning commission was trying to get to.
Mhm.
They felt there was a problem. They based it on some observations. And then they created a condition as part of a conditional use permit procedure. It's relatively clear that they kind of worked within that scope. From a staff perspective, they did some of the things that we would want to see them do if they created a condition in general terms. It's up to you to decide if that's a condition that you agree with, if it's a problem that you agree exists, and those sorts of things.
Very well stated. My concern is that it feels as though we're in the midst, because I think both Robert, Mr. Suppy, and the applicant bring up very valid concerns that we're hearing throughout the community on both sides of the issue. And I know that all of us have understanding of both sides of the issue. I'm not comfortable with an applicant being kind of, for demonstrative purposes, the applicant that has conditions imposed based on what I feel is a very subjective code. And so I would like to propose that we actually do what Mr. Suppy said, which is address the code. To me, the code needs addressing as we're in discussion. I saw in one of the packets that planning commission recommended that we come back together for an additional kind of resolution of the discussion that we had in September initially around short-term rentals. And I think I would feel more comfortable if we as a council and planning commission got aligned of what our intent with short-term rentals is, so that one applicant isn't bearing us trying to figure this out and have a financial impact. Mr. Suppy is a very engaged citizen of Newberg. There are plenty of other people that are not as engaged that I think all of us have heard from that have very similar concerns to Mr. Suppy, but the vacation rentals were approved. So I don't think we can argue that this area has higher density and therefore is not meeting the livability section. When there are plenty of people in my 2-block radius that feel very similarly that have not had probably the opportunity in front of council to share what their concerns are. And I'm not comfortable with having one applicant. So I would take the opinion to side with the applicant and go back to address city code with the planning commission and a more robust discussion around what the future of short-term rentals looks like.
I like your idea, except that I think we have to decide on this applicant. I know we're going to address the short-term rental down the road, but we can't wait, we can't wait on this one. So I mean, down the road, but right now, I think we need to decide on this one. At this point, I'm leaning toward approving the appeal, as they have presented it. The parking, yes, is a concern, but it is in a commercial zone. I think what she plans on doing sounds wonderful, with the art, and it's, she would pick her whoever comes to stay carefully. She obviously cares because she spent the time and money to come back and appeal. So it is something that she cares about. She has a history of remodeling homes tastefully, and I find that very desirable. So I feel like approving her appeal, based on the application that I see here.
I have a quick question for Clay, and then I would like to just state what I'm thinking. Clay, is every application, or James, every application for a short-term rental a conditional use permit that they're applying for?
R1 and R2, low and medium density residential.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. First of all, I'd like to say I'm sympathetic to Mr. Suppy's parking headaches and lack of parking. I think they're primarily caused by the location of his home to the cultural center, although I acknowledge there are a number of other vacation rentals there. But for this home to be singled out as the only one that's given approved with a conditional use, I don't think is a good practice. And ironically, the people who would be staying there, attending the cultural center, won't take up any other parking spots. I don't possibly guests who aren't staying overnight, but let's presume all 10 will be staying there. So I would like to grant the appeal and take away any conditional use. I don't think we should single out one applicant like this.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't want to wait. Because from a business person standpoint, I would hate that. You know, because it's costing you money. And I agree with Peggy. I don't think we ought to single them out. I don't know what the reasoning was from the planning commission, but it's not fair to single one person out when everything else kind of gets passed. So, that's where I'm.
Can I clarify one thing? When I said we're all saying the exact same thing, which is great, but the piece of delay, I didn't mean the actual approval or denial. I meant that we should continue this conversation so that we don't have one person that's singled out. So yeah.
I don't think they were singled out. They said in their application 6 to 8 weeks, and that's why the planning commission went with that. And they've been struggling with short-term rentals, but I don't feel that they singled them out. They were just going off their application. And it was the only application that specified that.
So at this point, I'm going to close public testimony. Final comments from the staff. I think we've heard everything you have to say, right? Okay. So time for deliberations from the commission, which we've already begun. I guess I have watched the planning commission for many, many years. And I think it was the most horrible volunteer position that a person can have with the city of Newberg. Because you listen to people make their opinions about things that have nothing to do with the law. What makes this unique is that the planning commission saw in the application an opportunity to put what they thought was a very reasonable restriction based on the application. They didn't think that they were inconveniencing the owner. And we all know how they feel about about these vacation rentals. For those of you that don't know, that is Lincoln. That is Elise's son. I really feel like if the applicant would have not put anything on their application about the time that they wanted to rent it or not, this would have sailed through and we wouldn't be here today. And that's why I tried to give the applicant the opportunity to come up here and say what she didn't get the opportunity to say to the planning commission, which is some form of her plans have changed. She doesn't need that. So I too, with my apologies to the planning commission, who I believe did their dead level best to accommodate everybody in the city, I'm going to disagree, and I'm going to say that I also am going to support this application because I see no real reason not to. It's in the primary location for what it's for. The reason that is a hotspot for vacation rentals, by the way, is because that's where people want to come. That is the reason that we have these. They want to come to Newberg and take part in the event. So what better place to be than right across the street from the cultural center? And I certainly understand the parking issues, and I disagree with the state and their level of parking that's required. But I see no real reason other than I don't like this to say that we should not do that. So I'm going to vote in favor of the appeal. So if somebody would like, I guess, let's finish deliberations. I think you've all said what you want to say. Okay. So would somebody like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I have some closing announcements too. Um, So, and I'll direct this to Mr. Elzinga, the legal counsel for the applicant. There's a 7-day timeline to submit final written arguments in connection with the hearing. Asking if you waive that 7-day written argument. Okay, thank you. So some post-hearing announcements. If the decision is not made tonight and continued to another date, the record could be reopened at that later date by motion of the council. Therefore, do not assume no further evidence will be taken. If the decision is made tonight, the council has the authority to reconsider the decision following proper procedure. This motion to reconsider is usually required to be made at the next meeting of the city council. The fact that the council could reconsider their decision does not affect the length of time for appeal of that decision. Mr. Mayor, that concludes the closing city attorney announcements.
Thank you. So this is the point where we need to make a motion. Would somebody like to do that? Peggy?
Do we have to do a waiving a second reading for this one?
No, Councilor Gilbert, no.
Well, I move that we approve the appeal, which adopts City Council Order 2024-0046 and approve, well, that's approving the conditional.
Yeah, you said it.
Okay, conditional use permit as previously recommended.
Second.
All right, it has been moved and seconded that we approve the appeal. Is there any further discussion? Rachel, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, I missed the second. Can I get that again? Wait, okay, thank you.
Second.
Council, staff would like just to get a quick clarification. Because of the findings required when we're doing a quasi judicial decision, we would just like to make sure we understand this for the purposes of crafting the order. There's a placeholder in Exhibit B. And so it is our understanding that you have found that the impacts will be, what was the impacts will be minimal as approved in Exhibit B, or if it is approved.
Yes, that is what we were saying, but I don't want to speak for everyone, but that was what I was saying. But I think that what I'm hoping we can do is define what create definitions for livability and all the subjective words.
In the
We're
code
saying
that we
it
have
because
here
we
and for
find
the
it
night,
minimal.
for tonight with this hearing, you're finding that the impacts of this operation would be minimal. Yes. Thank you.
Ready for the roll call? Okay. Counselor McBride,
Yes.
Counselor Wheatley,
Yes.
Counselor Yarnell Holloman,
Yes.
Counselor Kilberg,
Yes.
Mayor Rosacker,
Yes.
and that's 5.
All right. Let's come back to order. All right, we are nearing the end of our agenda. The next item is the discussion of the wine industry. I personally have had several discussions with David Adelsheim, and these all started, when he came to the city council to present the Poysdorf delegation. But what I never understood was that the wine industry in Oregon is a $13 billion industry. Billion with a B. In taxes, property taxes, it pays over $250 million to the state. The interesting thing to me was that the largest wine growing region in our state is the Willamette Valley. And the zip code 97132 has more wineries than any other county in the entire state. We potentially have a lot of money sitting out there that is coming into this industry that we could be bringing to Newberg. It's also come to my attention recently that Sherwood has started marketing themselves as the gateway to wine country. Now, Sherwood has absolutely no wineries in there. Well, they do in the surrounding area. Washington County has some, but not very many, and certainly not as good as the ones around Newberg. So, David and I have had a few discussions, and what we would like to do is make the group larger. We would, he wants to bring 3 or 4 people from the wine industry. And I'm hoping that at least one other city councilor would like to be part of this discussions. And we'll just see where it goes. As far as I'm concerned, Newberg is wine country. And we should be in the center of these discussions, not on the outside. You know, a lot of people look at the winery, and I was guilty of this for many, many years. I perceive them as farmers. And, you know, farmers don't pay a lot of money. Well, the difference is this crop that they're growing pays real money. It's, they can sell the grapes for more money than you could make on hazelnuts or hay. So it's a good farm crop. And a lot of businesses exist to service that industry. And that's where the real money is. That's where the business owners, the small business owners, you know, selling bottles, whatever, do. And I don't know much about this yet, but I want to learn. And I would hope that at least one of the council would like to do this, and that you would all start looking into this in a little bit different way. As you know, we have an urban renewal coming up. There are a lot of people who would like to see some major development going on down there by the waterfront. Why not get the wine industry involved? Why not have them bring some four-star restaurants into our community to start to do business? So, if you're interested, please let me know. Elise, go ahead.
I'm interested, to serve on an ad hoc committee with you on this topic. I would be I mean, I agree with everything that you just said. I think that, you know, wine growers, grape growers, however you want to call it, are farmers and part of our largest employer economy beyond some of our larger manufacturing. But I really want to I really want to ensure that it loops back into Dace Newberg. Because there she is. Just because this is such a fundamental piece of what Taste does for a lot of the wineries within our area. So I don't think I would want to be, and you didn't say this, but I wouldn't want to be spending additional dollars outside of our TLT budget to be on wine marketing, but I would absolutely want to be involved in conversations with wineries about how we can be more supportive from a city council perspective and complementing what Lee is doing. So really, in my mind, Lee is in charge and we're there as a complementary duo, whoever the person is, to be able to address legislative issues that they see that are prohibiting their growth, or even advocacy at the state level, I think would be appropriate, from you with Representative Sharp or whoever it is. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it's awesome that you have been pursuing active conversations with the wine industry, and I think it goes a long ways. And I don't think that they've had that from a mayor, so I think that, you know, acknowledgement to you for doing that.
So why, I guess, I mean, I guess we can compliment, or we can help them a little bit, but I don't know, why are we getting into the marketing side when you have Taste of Newberg? That's their job. And so I guess I still don't understand the big picture of what would him or any other of the wine growers want us to specifically do.
I thought that, I think maybe you mean marketing, but I would encourage that it's more industry focused. So it's, you know, development, growth within the industry, how we attract, you know, employees for them. Are they struggling with staffing? What does their labor look like? Just like we would with an ADEC or a DCI or a Providence. I think that it would be wise to actually just have a ad hoc that could then transform into, if there's another industry like light industrial, we're trying to attract light manufacturing, I think it would be helpful. It would probably be hurtful for Will to be able to move faster, but it would be helpful to have a couple of us assigned to different industries so that we could be supportive to Will if we're trying to expand light industrial. I know Denise had relationships with manufacturing, and that's no one's really taken that baton from her to be in support of Will. So I do think that we are lacking in the industry support beyond, what we do on our own time.
Honourable Mayor and councillors, I would say that clearly, while the marketing wheelhouse is and should belong to Taste, and any cross-committee work should be with Taste, there are some things that the city council could do that would further these goals, not necessarily within the realm of marketing, but perhaps in terms of changing the discussion. To lean upon the example of our friends in Austria, there is a very robust profile for the wine industry in that community. And there are things that their city council does that have furthered the goals of an organization like Taste. And for example, they have a festival named for the wine industry, and it brings people from all over Europe, not just Austria, to attend for all the tastings and all the events. They also have art, which is in all the storefronts, even storefronts that have got nothing to do with wine or restaurants, have the symbol of the famous wine bottle of Poisdorf. And these are sorts of things that could be done to assist Taste. And if I dare opine this may be the end of me as a city manager. Old Fashioned Festival. It's a fine old tradition. But can you imagine if that was called the Willamette Valley Wine Festival? What then could Sherwood say with their paltry claims to be the gateway to wine country? That's that.
So go ahead, Mike.
Well, whatever we do, I just want to beat Sherwood and we can name number one. So I'll be on that committee.
Okay. So I don't think we need to take any official action here other than to, tell your friends. And, are you serious, Mike? You want to be on that?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Okay. So, let's talk later and we could get it, one more counselor on there if there was, if somebody wanted to be. So, all right.
Excuse me, Bill.
Hey, you snooze, you lose.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
can we get a motion to officially appoint a wine marketing ad hoc committee or something?
Certainly, do we want to, city manager? Do we want an ad hoc committee? Do we want some other informal?
I would suggest that the best step first would be for the delegates of the council to meet with Taste Newberg and kind of hammer out a roadmap first. And then that might become an ad hoc committee, or it might take some other format. But I would sure love to see and I'm not even a wine drinker, for shame. But I would love to see this be a wine festival here and other things like that. It would just be very good to really, we make the best dental equipment in North America. But there's something else we can do. This is a thing we can do.
I agree. And I'm the representative for Taste, so I do think at least at the beginning, it would make sense for me to participate.
I can tell you for sure that taste always comes up in these discussions. I know that David is interested in having Taste be part of this, not necessarily the first few meetings was what he said, but, Because he's looking at it the same way the city manager is, that we need to figure out our organization before we start figuring out what the members are. So, there we go. The last item on our agenda was one that, I had talked to the city manager about. No, we're not gonna form anything just yet. I think the city manager had a good suggestion. We'll have some more talks first. So the last item was, an idea that I came up with, which was to have a debate for the city councilors as well as possibly the, county commissioners who are up for election. And it seemed like a really good idea that we could, be open and be accommodating to our citizens and help them to become informed. But as I talked to my friends about it, I realized that it has several problems. One of them, I'm sure James is over there thinking the staff can't spend any time on an election. So that's out. There's probably other legal problems that would prohibit us from doing this. And the worst part is that if we tried to do, no matter who tries to do it, some people are going to see it as being us trying to put our thumb on the scale. And that's not something that we ever want to be guilty of here. So unless if somebody, I mean, we can certainly discuss it, but, what do you think?
I was
Peggy?
just going to say in past years, I don't know how many past years, but when I was running, the Chamber of Commerce sponsored it along with George Fox. So they're doing that. We wouldn't really need to do a different one. Maybe ask if I guess maybe even having a counselor on that committee wouldn't even maybe be kosher. But anyway, as long as we have the debate forum, and wasn't perfect, but I thought it was pretty good forum.
Yeah, so, yeah, I don't think we need to do this. I mean, we're reinventing the wheel. Chamber always gets involved. George Fox always gets involved and does it. I don't want to spend any kind of taxpayers' money on anything for something like that. If it ever came up that we would be spending some money to even provide water for people to drink. I mean, you know, I just, yeah, I don't want to do that. I think we let it die.
So thank you for killing my good idea. Yes, sir.
Cause at first blush, I really liked this concept, but let me say this. Think I would also like to reach out to Scott at the Chamber just to suggest to him, his deal, that they consider booking the new beautiful stage theatre space that we now have in our fantastic cultural center, which is there's nothing like that, that wouldn't be better. And see if he wants to run with the ball, his show, but maybe in a fantastic new venue.
Right.
So I'm the liaison for the chamber, and I was at that meeting today. And so John Bridges announced that October 15th, save the date, will be the first debate. So they're coming out with one, and so all of us that are up for re-election are going to be contacted. So it's already in motion.
Yeah, their forum in the past has been asked the same question to all 6 candidates, and that to me is not the best way to get candid answers, but I sure appreciate that they're doing it.
Hold on though. I think you're right about that. So your intent is good. I do think you're not running for election right now. You should give that feedback.
Yeah,
You're the mayor.
I hear you.
You should give that feedback. Then I think they should take your ideas that you had around this, the way the questions go.
Sounds good. So anybody have anything else to bring up? The meeting's adjourned.